The Zymos is an infested pistol added in Update 29 that fires explosive spores which dig into enemy heads before exploding in toxic clouds and spawning spores to seek out and attack nearby enemies. This weapon can be attained very early on from the Niklas, requiring you to only be of neutral standing to obtain the blueprints and mineral crafting blueprints to make the weapon in your foundry, though you will have to be Mastery Rank 11 to make it. As mentioned previously, the weapon excels on headshots, burrowing into the enemy while dealing constant damage and expanding their heads before exploding in radial damage, dealing 953 toxin damage in an explosion while also causing 6 seeking projectiles to attack nearby enemies for 333 toxin damage each. Both of these stats are currently not shown in the UI, however, so the damage of this weapon does seem lower than it actually is when hitting the head. This weapon naturally excels very well against the Corpus, as hitting heads of Corpus normally bypasses a little bit of their shield gating, and the added toxin explosion means they usually won't survive very long. It's also fairly good against the Grineer when built for corrosive in heat or viral in heat, and devastating if you can fully remove the armor of said Grineer with some Warframe abilities. This weapon is unfortunately pretty poor against the infested, as while most do have heads, even the Jugulus, despite not having any bonus damage, most enemies move around quickly and their heads are often sometimes bent backwards out of view like runners, or small like ancient heads. The main problem with the Zymos is when you realize that the vast majority of the potential damage comes from headshots, and while constant staggers are nice, not hitting the head makes this weapon about as strong as some starter pistols in the game, even less so if you consider the slow fire rate and reload time. Hitting the head of enemies with this weapon without assistance is also pretty difficult, since the weapon does not have perfect accuracy and has travel time, 2 factors that usually make for a bad headshot weapon, but this weapon requires it to obtain maximum damage. So, let's talk quickly about how to improve the Zymos and make it easier to hit enemy heads for best results. First, frames that can hold enemies in place as still as possible is ideal, such as Harrow, Vauban, Frost, or even Gera, though turning enemies to glass takes Gera a little while to do. Harrow works best as he can not only chain enemies down for easier headshots, but he can buff the weapon's slow fire rate and increase the critical chance, working similar to the new core, where it has good critical damage but low critical chance, allowing the weapon to red crit on headshots and increase the damage significantly. With some Morphoria, you could also replace the extra status mod with crit damage to maximize this specific combo. Vauban can remove the armor of enemies with Bastille and hold them in place for easy headshots, while Frost can remove some armor from enemies he freezes in place with Avalanche, and allowing for easy headshots and a bit more damage against armored units, with a similar thing taking place with Gera, as glassed enemies take bonus damage. The other thing to note is, despite being part of the update, using Zaku would be a bad idea, as Zata's Whisper's void damage effect forces projectiles to hit body shots and will make the weapon very rarely hit the head. Another thing you could consider is using the Scourge's Throne mode, which will pulse enemies' heads once in a while, and when enemies get affected, there is a 2-second cooldown by the way, the Zymos will almost always hit enemies' heads when shot near them, requiring less precise aiming, although the Scourge only lasts a measly 20 seconds, requiring constant replacement to use properly. The Zymos is one of those weapons that has pretty good potential, but requires very specific synergies and tactics to make full use of its special mechanics, making it a little too clunky for me to use. Thank you for watching.